Hey guys, tonight you're not a king, knight, or noble lord. You're just the exhausted medieval courier desperately trying to survive one more frozen road before dawn. Your boots are soaked, your horse is judging you, and somewhere out there in the dark forest, someone may be willing to kill for the sealed letter hidden beneath your cloak. Medieval messengers crossed war zones, plague roads, flooded rivers, and forests full of thieves armed with little more than a tired horse and terrible luck. So if you enjoy slow, immersive medieval stories that help you relax and drift off to sleep, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now settle in, lower the lights, and let's ride into the dangerous world of medieval messengers and couriers. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing in the outer yard of a cold stone castle, while winter mist curls along the ground like pale smoke from an unseen fire. The air smells of wet wool, horse sweat, and damp straw left too long beneath muddy boots. Somewhere high above, beyond narrow windows glowing amber through the fog, servants hurry along timber galleries carrying candles that drip beeswax onto worn floorboards. A bell rings from the chapel tower, low and heavy, as if even the iron itself feels tired tonight. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders and immediately discover what medieval travel rarely mentions in songs and heroic tales. Absolutely everything is wet. Your boots are wet. The walls are wet. The horse beside you looks emotionally wet. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. A groom passes carrying a sack of oats while muttering about wolves on the North Road, and you catch yourself wondering how long you would truly survive out here. Honestly, you probably would not last a week before complaining about the smell alone. The smoke trapped beneath the rafters could defeat stronger souls than yours. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the wind rattles the gate chains tonight, you should also comment with your location and local time. Somewhere out there, another tired traveller may be listening beside their own quiet window. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The castle yard groans softly around you as carts creak through mud thick enough to swallow a shoe. Men-at-arms warm their hands beside a brazier filled with charcoal, their helmets dull with drizzle. A pair of kitchen boys hurry past carrying trenchers stacked with coarse bread and smoked fish meant for the evening meal in the great hall. One of them slips in the muck and nearly drops everything. Though he saves the bread with the kind of heroic desperation usually reserved for saints and relics. You stand near the stable wall beside your horse, a narrow grey mare with patient eyes and frost clinging to her mane. She exhales long streams of white breath into the cold air. The animal smells strongly of hay and leather and long roads. You already know you will grow more fond of this horse than many people you meet. No one can quite agree whether castle horses understand fear before humans do, but stablemen swear they sense danger days ahead of storms, battles, or bad news. Some even tie small charms of rowan wood into the bridles to ward away evil spirits said to linger near crossroads. You notice one such charm hanging now beneath your mare's neckpiece, polished smooth by weather and touch. Above the yard rises the keep itself, massive and dark against the cloudy sky. Light spills through arrow slits like narrow ribbons of gold. Somewhere inside, a fire cracks in a lord's chamber while servants lay fresh rushes across stone floors to soften footsteps and soak up spills. The rich always sleep warmer than messengers. That is one of the oldest laws in Christendom. A guard finally waves you toward a side door beneath the keep stairs. You duck inside, leaving behind the wet hiss of sleet against stone. Warmth hits your face immediately. though warmth in a medieval castle mostly means you can no longer see your own breath every few seconds. The passage smells of old smoke, damp wool cloaks, onions hanging from hooks, and the faint sourness of too many people surviving winter together. A servant carrying tallow candles brushes past you without apology. Another drags a bucket of ashes toward the yard. Somewhere farther down the corridor, dogs bark beside the kitchens. You're led into a chamber lined with faded tapestries showing hunts no one remembers clearly anymore. Their woven colours have darkened with age and soot, leaving the hunters looking oddly mournful. A fire burns low in the hearth, while a scribe bends over a table covered in parchment. The scribe barely glances up as you enter. His fingers are stained black with ink, and there is wax caught in his beard. He looks like a man who has spent half his life arguing with geese for ownership of feathers. Upon the table rests a folded letter sealed with deep red wax bearing the mark of the lord of this castle, a stag beneath a crown of thorns. The room quiets as the steward enters. He wears a fur-lined cloak damp at the hem and carries an iron keyring heavy enough to stun a cow. The keys clink softly as he approaches. Medieval castles adore keys. Every chest, pantry, chapel cupboard, wine store, and side gate requires one. Important people measure their authority partly by how loudly they jingle while walking. The steward studies you for a long moment. "You know the North Road?" he asks. You nod once. Then you know enough, which is not especially comforting. He presses the folded letter into your gloved hand. The parchment feels dry and stiff despite the damp cold surrounding everything else. The seal remains warm from fresh wax. "You ride through Black Alder Forest before dawn," he says quietly. "You stop for no fairs, no hunts, no drinking houses unless weather forces it. The message goes to Lord Edric at the Border Keep." At the mention of the Border Keep, even the scribe pauses writing. That is never a good sign. Those who tell the tale never fully agree why tensions grow near the border this winter. Some blame disputed taxes, others whisper of missing caravans, burned watchtowers, or raiders slipping across frozen marshes. A few claim darker things entirely, that strange lights move between the trees at night and travellers vanish without sound. But medieval people blame nearly everything on spirits eventually. If bread burns, spirits. If cows limp, spirits. If someone snores too loudly in the guest hall, probably spirits again. Still, the room feels colder now. The steward lowers his voice further. If the seal breaks before arrival, you return immediately. You tuck the letter inside your cloak beneath the wool layers close to your chest. Messengers often hide documents this way, using body warmth to keep wax from cracking in winter cold. Some couriers even sew secret pockets into tunics or boots. Others memorize messages entirely, though that carries its own dangers. Human memory becomes remarkably unreliable after 3 days of rain and bad ale. The scribe finally looks up from the table. "Watch the shrines along the old forest road," he mutters. "Travellers leave offerings there." "For safety, you ask?" "For luck," he says. "Safety costs extra. At least medieval humour survives the weather." Outside, the chapel bell rings again. One slow note drifts through the stone walls. Evening deepens beyond the narrow windows, turning the yard blue-grey beneath gathering frost. Somewhere in the kitchens, supper is being served pottage thick with barley and leeks, rough bread, perhaps a little salted pork if fortune smiles upon the household tonight. But you will not rest long. Before dawn, you ride north with a sealed letter beneath your cloak, into forests where roads dissolve into mud and rumour, where monastery bells echo through mist, and where even honest travellers sometimes vanish between one watchfire and the next. The fire crackles softly beside you while wind presses against the shutters. And already the long road is beginning. Morning arrives reluctantly. Long before sunrise, you stand once more in the castle yard beneath a sky the colour of cold iron. Frost whitens the stable roofs and stiffens the straw beneath your boots. Somewhere overhead, unseen crows complain from the battlements as though personally offended by winter itself. The bell for matins rings from the chapel tower, slow and hollow through the dark. In medieval life, bells govern nearly everything. Bells wake monks, summon prayers, warn of fire, announce death, signal curfews, and occasionally remind you that you have once again failed to become a wealthy noble sleeping beside a roaring hearth. Your mare shifts impatiently while a sleepy stable boy tightens the saddle straps with numb fingers. He cannot be older than 12. His nose runs constantly from the cold, and he wipes it on his sleeve with the efficiency of a long practice. "You'll want the east road first," he says. "The west path floods near the mill." You thank him and hand over a small copper coin. The boy looks surprised enough to remember your face for years. The castle gates creak open slowly, chains rattling overhead while torchlight flickers across wet stone. Guards wrapped in wool cloaks stamp warmth into their boots. One of them raises a lantern to inspect your face, though mostly, you suspect, to avoid freezing where he stands. Then the road swallows you. The sound of the gate closing behind carries strangely far in the cold dawn. Ahead stretches a narrow track bordered by frozen fields and bare trees trembling in the wind. Your horse's hooves strike mud hidden beneath crusts of ice, producing a steady rhythm that settles into your bones. Clop, splash, clop. The world smells of wet earth, chimney smoke drifting from distant cottages, and the faint sharp scent of wood smoke from charcoal burners somewhere unseen among the hills. You ride for hours beneath low clouds while dawn slowly leaks into the countryside. Villages emerge now and then from the mist clusters of timber huts, with thatched roofs darkened by rain and soot. Thin smoke curls upward from roof vents while villagers already begin their work despite the cold. A woman scatters grain for chickens beside a frozen trough. 2 boys carry firewood toward a bakehouse. An old man repairs a fence while muttering to himself in a way that suggests either deep wisdom or total surrender to winter. Probably both. You pass roadside shrines every few miles. Most are simple wooden crosses or little alcoves holding painted saints blackened by smoke and weather. Travellers leave offerings there, bits of bread, carved tokens, dried herbs, even tiny iron nails hammered into the wood for protection. No one can quite agree whether the offerings truly help, but almost nobody risks ignoring the shrines completely. Medieval roads feel safer when every possible saint has been politely bribed. By late morning, the walls of a market town rise ahead through drifting mist. The town sits behind timber palisades reinforced with stone near the gatehouse. Smoke hangs low above crowded rooftops, and the smell reaches you before the walls do fish brine. Dung, baking bread, damp wool, spilled ale, and humanity compressed into muddy streets. A line has formed outside the gate already. Merchants wait beside carts loaded with barrels and wool bales. Pilgrims wrapped in patched cloaks clutch walking staffs decorated with tiny pewter badges from distant shrines. A butcher argues loudly with a guard over toll fees while 2 geese wander freely beneath the cartwheels like tiny feathery criminals. Your mare snorts at them suspiciously. You join the slow-moving line toward the gate. Above the entrance hangs the town's painted crest, faded almost beyond recognition. Rainwater drips steadily from the wooden beams overhead. Guards armed with spears inspect travellers one by one beneath a narrow awning. The process moves with all the speed and joy of a medieval tax discussion, A monk ahead of you presents a letter bearing the seal of his abbey. The guards wave him through immediately. Monks enjoy a level of travel privilege normally reserved for saints and people carrying large sticks. When your turn arrives, one guard lifts his lantern toward your face while another studies your horse. Name asks the older man. You answer, purpose. Courier work. That earns a longer look. Messengers occupy an uncertain place in medieval life. Necessary, respected in theory, and distrusted almost everywhere. A courier may carry peace treaties, tax orders, death notices, military commands, or scandalous secrets. People become nervous around sealed letters. Parchment can start wars more quietly than swords ever could. The guard gestures toward your cloak. You carry documents. One sealed message. For whom? Border keep of Lord Edric. The younger guard exchanges a glance with the older one. There it is again, that tiny pause whenever the border keep is mentioned. Even now, it is hard to tell whether fear surrounds the place because of genuine danger, or simply because everyone enjoys terrifying travellers. Medieval people adore dramatic warnings. Tell a villager you're crossing a forest, and he immediately describes 3 murders, 2 hauntings, and an unusually aggressive goose. Still, the older guard leans closer. Road north stays open, he mutters quietly, but avoids strangers after dusk. Comforting advice, considering half the world counts as strangers. He waves you through at last after collecting a small toll coin. Inside the town, noise closes around you like heavy cloth. Carts rattle across uneven stones slick with mud. Vendors shout prices for onions, smoked eel, and wool mittens. Somewhere nearby, a blacksmith hammers iron in slow-ringing blows that echo between buildings. The smell of fresh bread drifts from a bakehouse window, warm and almost painfully inviting. You guide your mare carefully through crowded streets, where puddles reflect strips of grey sky overhead. Dogs bark from doorways. Children chase one another between market stalls. A woman carrying candles brushes past while muttering a prayer beneath her breath. Near the square, you stop briefly beside a water trough where horses drink beneath dangling icicles. A one-eyed merchant wrapped in fox fur nods toward you. North Road, he asks. You nod cautiously. Bad season for it. Bad season for every road. The merchant grins. True enough. He bites into a piece of coarse bread and lowers his voice. They say riders disappeared near Black Alder last week. Some swear bandits haunt the forest. Others claim deserters from border skirmishes now rob travellers beneath the trees. A few insist older things move there at night. Pale shapes glimpsed between trunks after moonrise. But travellers always invent stories for dark roads. Fear fills empty forests faster than wolves do. Still, you notice yourself checking the sealed letter beneath your cloak again. The wax remains unbroken. Good. You continue deeper through the town, passing beneath hanging signs painted with boots, keys, tankards, and loaves. Inns spill smoke and laughter into the street despite the early hour. Outside one alehouse, a drunk sleeps peacefully beside a barrel while snowflakes gather in his beard. Honestly, he may have discovered the secret to surviving medieval travel. At the northern gate, the guards barely glance at you before lifting the barrier chain. Beyond the walls, the road narrows once more into pale winter fields, stretching toward distant forests. The town noise fades gradually behind. Ahead waits the long northern road, wet and uncertain beneath low skies. And somewhere beyond those trees, hidden beneath frost and rumour, the border keep still waits for your letter. The road north grows lonelier by afternoon. Behind you, the market town dissolves slowly into grey haze and chimney smoke, leaving only the sound of your mare's hooves and the restless wind moving through winter hedges. Frost clings stubbornly to the shaded ditches beside the road, though patches of mud still gleam black beneath wagon ruts deep enough to trap an ankle. You ride with your shoulders hunched against the cold while thin rain drifts now and then from low clouds. The weather cannot decide whether to freeze you properly or merely dampen your soul a little at a time. Both approaches feel effective. The fields around you stretch empty except for scattered sheep and distant plough teams moving slowly through stiff earth. Their drivers look wrapped in enough wool to survive a siege. A pair of women gather dead branches near a hedgerow while exchanging gossip loud enough to challenge monastery bells. You pass them with a nod. One woman crosses herself after noticing the sealed leather satchel beneath your cloak. Messengers unsettle people, not because of who you are, but because of what you might carry. A rider arriving fast through winter often brings news nobody wishes to hear. Taxes, levies, deaths, royal decrees, disease warnings, marriage contracts, occasionally all at once, which must make supper conversations truly exhausting. By late afternoon, the clouds darken fully and cold rain begins in earnest. The first drops strike your cloak softly, then harder. Soon the road shines slick beneath the downpour while water drips steadily from your hood onto the saddle pommel. Your mare lowers her head against the weather with the quiet resignation of a creature who has endured human decisions for far too long. Ahead, through sheets of rain, a crooked wooden sign swings above the roadside. An alehouse. The sign depicts a faded white stag lifting one hoof beside a barrel. Most of the paint has peeled away, giving the animal the expression of something deeply disappointed by life. Warm light glows faintly through narrow windows. You hesitate only briefly before turning toward it. Even the sternest messenger eventually learns that soaked parchment delivers poorly. The alehouse crouches beside the road like an old dog avoiding weather. Smoke rises thickly from its chimney, carrying the smell of peat and roasting onions into the rain. Chickens shelter miserably beneath a cart nearby while a shaggy brown dog watches your arrival with suspicious eyes. The animal begins following you immediately. That happens often enough on medieval roads. Dogs attach themselves to travellers for scraps, warmth, or reasons known only to dogs. Some people believe black dogs wandering crossroads are spirits of the dead. Others simply believe they are hungry. This one appears mostly hungry. Inside, warmth and noise wrap around you all at once. The room glows amber beneath beeswax candles and a smoky hearth fire large enough to roast a boar. Rushes cover the floor, though their freshness remains highly questionable. Medieval inns replace rushes occasionally, which means the floor smells like old ale, wet boots, onions, smoke, and forgotten accidents layered gently over time. A perfect atmosphere for relaxation. Merchants crowd the benches near the fire while servants hurry between tables carrying wooden cups of ale and bowls of thick pottage. Cloaks steam beside the hearth. Rain hammers steadily against the shutters. You remove your gloves carefully and flex stiff fingers near the flames. The innkeeper approaches, wiping his hands on an apron already stained by years of determined cooking. "You riding north?" he asks. Apparently your entire personality now consists of looking cold and headed north. You order ale, bread, and whatever stew remains warm. The innkeeper serves you a bowl thick with barley leeks and bits of salted pork floating bravely against overwhelming greyness. Honestly, after a day on the road, it tastes magnificent. The brown dog settles beside your boots, hopefully. You surrender a scrap of bread, loyalty purchased. Around you, conversations rise and fall through the smoky air. A wool merchant complains about bridge tolls near the river crossing. Two pilgrims debate whether a saint's relic in the south cured blindness or merely cause temporary confusion. A carter insists he saw ghost lanterns moving through Black Alder Forest last winter. No lanterns sway like that, he mutters darkly over his cup. Blue light between the trees, no wind at all. His companion snorts. You were drunk. I was inspired by ale, the man corrects solemnly. A fair distinction by medieval standards. Still, several nearby travellers quietly cross themselves. No one can quite agree whether strange lights truly appear in the forest. Some blame marsh gas. Others whisper of wandering spirits unable to find burial ground after old border wars. Monks sometimes claim the devil himself delights in misleading travellers after nightfall. Medieval explanations rarely aim low. You warm your hands near the fire while rain continues outside. Water drips steadily from cloaks hanging near the door. Somewhere overhead, floorboards creak beneath guests settling into loft beds stuffed with straw. The innkeeper returns carrying a fresh pitcher. You'll not reach Black Alder before dark now, he says. I know. He studies you for a moment. Best stay the night. You glance toward the shuttered windows where rainwater streams like silver threads. The advice makes sense. Forest roads after dark are dangerous enough in daylight. Yet something about the sealed letter beneath your cloak presses quietly at your thoughts. Duty has a strange weight. You feel it even while sitting still beside a warm hearth. A thin man seated nearby suddenly speaks without looking up from his cup. Courier work pays poorly for the risk. His voice is calm, too calm. You turn slightly. He wears a dark travelling cloak damp from rain, though his boots appear cleaner than most road travellers manage this season. A narrow knife hangs at his belt. His beard is trimmed shorter than fashion usually allows beyond larger towns. You know courier work, you ask. Enough. He finally looks up. His eyes settle briefly on your satchel before returning to the fire. A tiny moment. Barely anything. Still, your hand moves unconsciously toward the hidden letter beneath your cloak. The man smiles faintly. Relax, he says. If I meant trouble, I'd offer you wine first. At least he has manners. The room grows quieter as evening deepens outside. One by one, travellers drift towards sleeping spaces along the loft or stable. Rain continues drumming against the roof while smoke curls lazily through rafters blackened by decades of soot. You notice the stranger eventually rise and leave without another word. Oddly, the brown dog watches him go with low ears. Animals notice things humans miss, or perhaps dogs simply distrust dramatic strangers, which honestly seems wise. Before sleeping, you check the letter once more beneath candlelight. The red seal remains untouched. Outside, beyond the warm glow of the alehouse, the north road disappears into rain and darkness leading steadily toward Black Alder Forest. And tomorrow, before dawn, you must follow it there. You wake before dawn to the sound of wind pressing rain against the shutters. For a few slow moments, you forget where you are. The loft above the alehouse feels dim and close, thick with the smell of straw mattresses, damp wool, wood smoke, and sleeping bodies. Somewhere nearby. A man snores with such determination that it seems less like sleep and more like a personal argument with the universe. The brown dog lies curled beside your bedroll. Apparently you own a dog now. A narrow slit window shows only darkness outside, though the storm has weakened into a fine cold drizzle. Beneath the loft, muted sounds rise from the common room, the scrape of benches, low voices, someone stirring a pot over the hearth. You sit up slowly, pulling your cloak tighter around your shoulders while your breath fogs faintly in the chill air. Medieval inns are generous with smoke and stingy with insulation. The dog lifts one eye hopefully. You already ate half my bread, you whisper. Its tail thumps once anyway. Downstairs, the innkeeper serves watered ale, oat bread, and a thin onion broth to the few travellers foolish enough to continue north before sunrise, which unfortunately includes you. A pair of pilgrims remain asleep near the hearth, wrapped completely in blankets like abandoned sacks of laundry. The mysterious traveller from last night is nowhere to be seen. That unsettles you more than it should. No one can quite agree whether experienced roadmen leave before dawn for safety or secrecy. Some claim honest travellers prefer daylight. Others insist darkness hides intentions better than faces ever can. You finish your meal while the innkeeper refills cups beside the fire. Forest Road gets narrow after the old shrine, he warns, easy to lose the path in fog. I'll manage. That's what the last courier said. You pause. What happened to him? The innkeeper shrugs with magnificent medieval vagueness. Maybe nothing. Very reassuring. Outside, the world feels hushed beneath lingering rain. Mist drifts low across the road while trees stand black against a pale horizon just beginning to brighten. Your mare stamps impatiently as you tighten saddle straps beneath the stable awning. The dog appears beside you again. You're not coming. The dog disagrees. 5 minutes later it trots behind your horse as though this arrangement had always existed. The road north gradually narrows until hedgerows close tightly on either side. Water drips steadily from bare branches overhead. Your mare's hooves splash through puddles hidden beneath fallen leaves while fog curls among the roots like pale breath. Soon the last open fields disappear behind you. Blackalder Forest begins quietly. No gates mark its boundary. No warning signs stand beside the road. Only the trees growing denser, older, and darker until daylight itself seems thinner beneath them. The forest smells of wet bark, moss, cold earth, and rotting leaves softened by endless rain. Ravens call somewhere high above the branches. Every sound carries strangely between the trunk's hoofbeats, dripping water, the creak of saddle leather. The dog trots close now instead of ranging ahead. Wise creature. You pass the first roadside shrine not long after sunrise. It leans crooked beneath an ancient alder tree wrapped in strips of faded cloth tied there by travellers seeking blessings. Within the tiny alcove rests a painted saint almost completely obscured by soot and wax drippings. Offerings crowd the base, wilted herbs, broken beads, tiny carved animals, even a child's shoe hardened by mud and age. Someone has left fresh bread there recently. Some swear roadside shrines protect travellers from spirits, thieves, and illness. Others believe they merely comfort frightened people passing through lonely places. Even now, it is hard to tell whether faith changes the road itself or only the hearts walking upon it. Still, you find yourself nodding respectfully while passing. No reason to offend every saint at once. Deeper into the forest, the road becomes little more than muddy tracks weaving between roots and stones. Twice your mare nearly slips crossing shallow streams swollen by rain. Once you dismount entirely to lead her through a patch of deep muck, while the dog watches with what feels suspiciously like amusement. This is the reality of medieval travel rarely celebrated in songs, endless mud and damp discomfort interrupted occasionally by mild panic. Hours pass slowly. The fog thickens. At times you can barely see 10 paces ahead through the trees. Moss hangs from branches like old cloth. The forest seems strangely empty of birds now, leaving only the drip of water and the distant groaning of branches moving in wind. Then you hear another horse. Faint at first. A slow rhythm somewhere ahead. You stop immediately. Your mare lifts her head sharply. The dog freezes beside the road with ears forward. Through the mist emerges a lone rider cloaked in dark wool atop a chestnut horse. The same traveller from the alehouse. Of course. He reins in several paces away. "Well met again," he says calmly. "Seems we share the road. For now?" Rain beads along his hood and shoulders. Up close, you notice his gloves are finer than most common travellers could afford. His horse too carries good tack, though deliberately plain. "Interesting." The dog growls softly. The stranger notices. "Your companion dislikes me. He has excellent judgment." That earns a quiet laugh. For a while you ride together through the mist without speaking much. Forest sounds close around you again. Somewhere deeper among the trees comes the crack of a branch heavy with rainwater. The stranger eventually gestures toward your satchel. Still carrying the letter safely, your hand tightens instinctively near your cloak. You ask many questions, and you answer few. Safer that way. Usually, silence settles once more. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether couriers fear thieves more than spies. Thieves want coin, spies want knowledge. One empties your purse, the other may quietly ruin kingdoms. The road bends sharply near midday, revealing the remains of an old stone marker half swallowed by moss. Beside it stands another shrine larger than the first, protected beneath a timber roof darkened by age. Dozens of tiny wax candles burn inside despite the damp air. Someone maintains this place carefully. The stranger reins in beside it and dismounts. "You stop to pray, you ask?" "To listen." He studies the forest silently for several moments. Then he says very softly, "We're being followed." The words vanish almost immediately into the mist. Yet now that he mentions it, you hear it too. Not close, but somewhere behind. A distant sound of movement between the trees. Slow, careful, watching. The dog's fur rises along its spine, and suddenly the forest no longer feels merely cold and lonely. It feels occupied. For several long moments, neither of you moves. Rain drips softly from the shrine roof while candle flames tremble in their little pools of wax. The forest beyond the road remains grey and silent except for the faint creak of branches overhead. Somewhere behind you, hidden among the mist and alder trunks, something shifts again. Not close enough to see, close enough to hear. Your mare tosses her head uneasily, and the brown dog presses against your boots with a low growl rumbling deep in its chest. The stranger beside you listens without expression. Then, quite calmly, he reaches into the shrine alcove and lights another tiny candle from the others already burning there. An unexpected moment for devotion. Or nerves. Some swear candles left in forest shrines confuse wandering spirits by giving them false stars to follow. Others claim travellers light them simply because darkness feels less lonely when someone else has passed before you. You are beginning to understand the appeal. The stranger finally turns. "Could be hunters," he murmurs. Could be worse." You do not ask what qualifies as worse. Medieval people have an exhausting talent for answering that question creatively. After another minute, the sound fades completely. No footsteps, no movement, only dripping water and distant wind. Eventually, the stranger mounts again. "We continue," he says, not exactly comforting, but at least practical. The road carries you deeper into black alder forest beneath a sky hidden entirely by branches. Fog hangs low among the trunks while moss-covered stones loom beside the path like crouching figures. The further north you travel, the older the trees seem to become. Some are enormous. Their bark twists in dark spirals thick with damp lichen. Roots bulge across the ground like ancient bones beneath skin. Tiny streams cut through the undergrowth carrying black water cold enough to numb fingers instantly. By afternoon, the rain finally weakens into drifting mist. You cross a narrow wooden bridge spanning a fast-moving creek where water churns pale around stones. Someone long ago nailed iron charms beneath the bridge, rails, crooked little symbols hammered flat by weather. Protection signs. No one can quite agree whether iron truly frightens evil spirits, but blacksmiths have earned excellent business from the possibility. The stranger pauses halfway across. Monastery ahead before sunset, he says. You know this road well. Well enough. Again that careful answer. You study him more openly now while riding. His speech sounds educated, though not noble exactly. His gloves are fine leather. His horse remains disciplined even in difficult terrain, and he watches the road behind almost as often as ahead. Messenger, soldier, spy. Perhaps all three. The dog seems undecided whether to bark at him or adopt him. Toward evening, the forest begins thinning slightly. Through the trees ahead appears a faint glow accompanied by the deep, distant ringing of bells. Monastery bells. The sound rolls softly through mist and branches like something half-dreamed. Your shoulders loosen despite yourself. There are few sights more comforting on dangerous medieval roads than a monastery before nightfall. Monks provide shelter, bread, warmth, and usually fewer stabbings than ordinary inns. Usually, the abbey emerges gradually from the forest, thick stone walls covered in ivy, narrow arched windows glowing amber, and a squat bell tower rising above tiled roofs slick with rain. Gardens lie sleeping beneath winter frost outside the walls, while smoke curls warmly from several chimneys. A carved wooden cross hangs above the gatehouse entrance. One elderly monk opens the gate after hearing your approach. His wool robes smell faintly of smoke and lavender herbs. Peace upon travellers, he says, and warmth upon their horses, adds the stranger quickly. The monk smiles. A wiser blessing. Inside the monastery walls the world changes completely. The forest noise fades behind stone and candlelight. Lanterns flicker beneath covered walkways connecting small buildings around a central courtyard. Bare fruit trees stand black against the dim sky while ravens hop silently along the cloister roofs. The air smells of baking bread, wet stone, beeswax, and wood smoke. You could almost sleep standing up. Novices lead your horses toward the stable while another monk guides you through the cloister passages toward the guest house. Sandals whisper softly across worn flagstones polished smooth by generations of footsteps. Monasteries measure time differently from the outside world. Not by markets or wars or weather, but by bells. Prayer bells before dawn, prayer bells at noon, prayer bells before sleep, a slow, endless rhythm dividing life into candles and silence. Inside the guest hall, a fire burns steadily beneath a hooded hearth, while travellers warm themselves on benches along the walls. A merchant with bandaged hands eats quietly from a wooden bowl. Two pilgrims sleep already beneath rough wool blankets despite the early hour. A young novice serves supper without speaking much. Pottage again, thick with beans and cabbage this time, alongside coarse bread still warm from the ovens. There is also a little cheese wrapped in cloth and weak ale brewed by the brothers themselves. Honestly, monastery ale tastes like someone whispered the concept of beer into a bucket of water. But it is warm. You sit beside the fire while steam rises faintly from your damp cloak. Across the room, the stranger finally lowers his hood fully for the first time. A thin scar crosses one cheek near his jaw. He notices your glance. Border roads, he says simply. Reasonable explanation. Probably. The brown dog settles near the hearth immediately as though ordained by God to supervise monastery fires specifically. One of the older monks notices the animal. Strange thing, he murmurs while arranging candles near the wall shrine. Dogs often find lost travellers before storms. Is that monastery wisdom, you ask? No, he says, just dogs. Fair enough. Later. While the other travellers drift towards sleep, you notice scribes working at tables near the adjoining chamber. Their hands move steadily beneath candlelight as quills scratch across parchment. Ink-stained fingers. Wax seals. Careful lines of Latin text. Monasteries preserve much of the written world during these centuries. Letters, laws, prayers, histories, maps, rumours, debts, and occasionally recipes questionable enough to count as crimes. One young scribe yawns while sanding fresh ink. "Courier," he asks quietly after noticing your satchel. You nod. He lowers his voice further. "North roads carry strange news lately." "What kind?" The scribe hesitates. "Missing riders, broken seals, messages arriving opened." Your chest tightens slightly beneath the cloak. The sealed letter still rests hidden against you, untouched. The scribe glances toward the shuttered windows. Some say men search the roads for certain correspondence. Who? He shakes his head. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. Helpful. Outside, the monastery bell rings for evening prayers. Deep notes echo through the courtyard while candlelight flickers gently against stone walls blackened by centuries of smoke. Beyond those walls, black alder forest waits in darkness. And somewhere out there, perhaps still following the road behind you, unseen footsteps may be moving quietly through the mist. The monastery wakes before the sun does. A bell begins in the dark, slow and deep, pulling everyone from uneasy sleep as gently as a hand tugging a thread. You open your eyes beneath a rough wool blanket while the guest house remains blue with early cold. The fire has sunk into red coals. Around you, travellers stir with soft groans, coughing quietly, drawing cloaks over shoulders, rubbing warmth back into hands. The brown dog is already awake, sitting beside the hearth as though awaiting holy orders. For a moment you lie still and listen. Outside, monks cross the courtyard toward prayer, their sandals whispering on frost-stiff stones. Somewhere nearby, a rooster makes an announcement nobody requested. The air smells of old smoke, damp wool, beeswax, and bread ovens beginning to heat. You touch your chest beneath the blanket. The letter remains there, wax unbroken. That small certainty steadies you more than breakfast ever could. The stranger with the scar sits near the doorway, already dressed, already watching the pale line of morning through the shutters. He looks as if sleep merely borrowed him for an hour and gave him back unimproved. "You leave soon?" he asks. "When the gate opens. Then we ride together a while." It is not quite a question. You do not answer immediately. In a safer world, company on a winter road would be welcome. In this one, every companion might be shield, witness, thief, spy, or simply someone else to blame if wolves appear. Medieval friendship often begins with mutual suspicion and shared discomfort. The monks feed you before departure, not generously exactly, but kindly coarse bread, a heel of cheese, watered ale, and a ladle of warm barley porridge thick enough to repair a wall. The old gate monk presses a dried sprig of rosemary into your hand. "For memory," he says. "Of what?" He smiles faintly. That is the trouble with memory. Some swear rosemary strengthens the mind and protects travellers from ill fortune, especially when tucked into a cloak near the heart. Others say monks simply like giving people herbs because it makes them seem mysterious. Either way, you slip it beside the hidden letter. Beyond the monastery gate, morning lies pale and cold over the land. The forest loosens gradually into open fields powdered with frost. For a time, the world feels almost peaceful. Your mare's hooves crunch softly along the frozen track. The dog trots ahead, nose low, leaving small prints in silvered mud. Behind you, the monastery bell rings once more, fading slowly through the trees until only wind remains. The road now crosses farmland belonging to scattered manors. Narrow strips of ploughed earth run side by side in long ridges, divided among peasants who owe labour, rent, hens, grain, or all of these to some lord whose hall smokes beyond the next rise. Winter has emptied much of the land of colour. Stubble fields shine white. Hedges stand dark and thorny. Ponds wear thin skins of ice. You pass a group of peasants repairing a ditch with wooden spades. Their hands are red from cold, their tunics patched at elbow and knee. One man wears straw stuffed inside his shoes for warmth. Another has wrapped his fingers in strips of old linen. Daily life here moves by necessity, not comfort. Ditches must be cleared before thaw. Firewood must be gathered before snow. Animals must be checked. Bread baked. Ale brewed. Roofs patched. Tools mended. And prayers said because nobody entirely trusts the weather to behave without supervision. A woman carrying a basket of turnips pauses as you ride past. "Courier?" she asks. You nod. She crosses herself. "Then may St. Christopher keep your horse from holes." A specific blessing and a sensible one. No one can quite agree whether St. Christopher protects travellers best at river crossings, forest paths, or simply anywhere feet become tired. But his image appears everywhere, painted near gates, carved above bridges, hanging in tiny badges from pilgrim cloaks. To move through the medieval world is to collect helpers, heavenly or otherwise, because roads are too long for pride. By midday, hunger returns. You stop beside a low stone wall near a winter field where crows hop importantly among frozen furrows. The stranger dismounts nearby but keeps his horse saddled. You share bread from the monastery and a little cheese wrapped in linen. The dog receives crumbs and accepts them with the solemn dignity of a bishop receiving tribute. The air is very still. From somewhere far off comes the faint ringing of a smith's hammer. The stranger looks toward the north. You know what lies after these fields. Marsh road, then river, and after the river, Lord Edric's lands. He nods. Then fewer friendly doors. You speak as if friendly doors are common. That earns a small smile. Fair point. As you eat, a cart approaches from the south, wheels creaking heavily beneath sacks of grain. A boy walks beside the oxen, clicking his tongue and tapping a stick against the yoke. The driver, a broad woman in a fur-lined hood, calls a greeting. "You two from the Abbey?" "Yes," says the stranger. "Bandits behind you." "Not today." "Blessed news," she says. "Was worried I'd dressed too poorly for robbery." She laughs at her own joke and continues south. You watch the cart vanish into the pale fields. A messenger learns to read such passing moments carefully. Ordinary travellers carry news without meaning to. A calm cart road may mean safety ahead. A fleeing merchant may mean trouble. A silent village may be worse than a shouting one. After resting, you ride on through country slowly rising into low hills. At their crests, you glimpse distant manor houses, timber halls surrounded by barns, dovecotes, hayricks, and fenced orchards. Smoke rises from great hearths where servants stir pottage in iron pots and reeves count winter stores under lock and key. The winter storehouse is the heart of survival now. Barrels of ale, salted meat, dried peas, beans, smoked fish, apples shriveled in straw, grain protected from rats with cats, traps, prayers, and occasionally threats shouted into the dark. Some swear rats understand curses if delivered with conviction. Results appear mixed. Late afternoon brings a harder cold. Clouds thicken again, purple-grey along the horizon. The road dips between hedges where puddles have frozen at the edges. Your fingers ache inside your gloves. The sealed letter feels strangely warm beneath your cloak, though perhaps that is only your worry returning. The stranger slows beside you. "Someone passed north not long ago," he says. You look down. There in the mud, fresh hoofprints cutting through frost. One rider, moving quickly. Ahead of you. The dog sniffs the tracks and whines. Could be any traveller, you say. Could be. Neither of you sounds convinced. Even now, it is hard to tell whether danger on the road comes from what follows behind or waits ahead. Couriers learn this quickly. The path is not a line but a thread, and hands may tug it from either end. The fields darken as evening approaches. Ahead, smoke rises near a small cluster of cottages beside the road. A village, poor but occupied. Somewhere within it, someone bakes bread. Somewhere, animals settle into byres. Children are called indoors, and shutters close against the cold. You ride toward it slowly, hoping for shelter, warmth, and perhaps a little news. Behind you, far away, the monastery bell is gone. Before you, the north road keeps its secrets. The village appears humble even by the forgiving standards of medieval roads. A handful of timber cottages huddle beside the track beneath roofs patched with straw, moss, and determination. Smoke leaks from crooked chimneys into the evening air, while chickens scratch stubbornly through frozen mud as though winter itself were merely an inconvenience. A narrow stream cuts behind the cottages, half covered with thin grey ice. Nearby stands a communal bakehouse with warm light glowing through cracks in the shutters. The smell of fresh bread drifts softly across the road, rich enough to make your stomach immediately forgive civilization for all its other failings. Your mare quickens slightly. Even horses appreciate soup weather. At the village centre stands a wayside cross wrapped with faded ribbons and tiny wooden charms, left by locals seeking protection through winter sickness. Someone has tied garlic bulbs beneath the crossbeam. No one can quite agree whether garlic wards off evil spirits, fever, or unpleasant neighbours, but medieval people remain committed to giving it every opportunity. The villagers notice you immediately. Travellers always draw attention here, especially armed ones or mounted couriers. Work slows subtly as you ride in. A man repairing a wheel pauses mid-hammer strike. Two women carrying buckets exchange quiet words. Children stare openly from behind fences before vanishing indoors at shouted warning. The stranger beside you lowers his hood slightly. You know these people, you ask. No? But they know your trouble already. Everyone assumes riders are trouble. Fair enough. An elderly reeve approaches from near the bakehouse carrying a lantern and an expression carefully balanced between hospitality and concern. His cloak smells strongly of sheep lanolin and wood smoke. "Evening," he says cautiously. "Evening. You seeking shelter? If there's room." The reeve studies both of you, then glances toward the darkening road behind. "Storm coming again tonight," he mutters. "You're welcome to stable horses and warm yourselves a while. No alehouse here, though." The stranger nods politely. "Warmth will do." The reeve leads you toward a long timber shed serving partly as barn, partly as gathering hall, and partly, judging by the smell, as storage place for absolutely everything nobody else wants indoors. Inside, villagers sit around a central fire pit mending tools, shelling beans, and whispering over bowls of cabbage stew. The smoky air hangs thick beneath soot-black rafters, where herbs and strips of dried fish dangle from hooks. You remove your gloves slowly near the fire while heat crawls painfully back into stiff fingers. The dog immediately finds a child willing to share scraps and begins behaving as though it has belonged to this village for generations. Traitor! A woman ladles stew into wooden bowls for you and the stranger. It is simple food: cabbage, onions, barley, and perhaps the distant memory of pork. Yet after days on the road, it tastes wonderfully alive. Outside, wind rises steadily. Rain taps against the roof. For a while, the village settles into quiet evening rhythms around you. A grandfather carves wooden pegs beside the fire while telling children a story about saints crossing frozen rivers. A young mother spins wool beneath candlelight. Someone quietly sharpens a sickle near the doorway. This is the hidden heartbeat of the medieval world, not kings or battles, but small rooms filled with tired people surviving weather together. Then shouting erupts outside. Everyone freezes. The reeve rises immediately while several men grab lanterns and hurry toward the door. You and the stranger exchange a glance before following. Out near the road, an ox cart has tilted violently into a drainage ditch. One wheel is shattered completely, spilling sacks of turnips and bundles of firewood across the mud. A middle-aged carter stands beside the wreck, muttering language that would probably alarm several saints at once. His ox looks deeply embarrassed by the situation. "Wheel snapped clean," says the reeve grimly. The broken wheel lies half buried in mud, its wooden spokes cracked around the hub. Medieval roads destroy wheels constantly. Too much weight, too much rain, one hidden stone in darkness, and suddenly your entire livelihood collapses sideways into a ditch. The villagers gather quickly with ropes and lanterns. You help steady the cart while others unload supplies. Mud sucks greedily at your boots. Rain drips from your hood into your eyes. The stranger braces one shoulder against the tilted frame with surprising strength, while the reeve directs everyone like a battlefield commander of turnips. "Lift there. Mind the axle. Someone stop feeding scraps to that dog." Too late. The dog is thriving. Eventually the cart is stabilized beneath the storm lanterns. Villagers drag the broken wheel toward the shed, while the exhausted carter sinks onto a stump nearby. "Was heading south before river floods," he says bitterly. "Now I'll lose 2 days." The stranger crouches beside the ruined wheel. Axle's worn too. The carter snorts. Everything's worn. An understandable medieval philosophy. Inside the hall again, wet cloaks steam beside the fire while villagers discuss the roads ahead. You listen carefully between spoonfuls of reheated stew. "The marsh road's worse this season," says one man. "Water near swallowed my mule." "Herd riders crossed north yesterday," adds another. Your attention sharpens. How many? 3 maybe, hard to tell in fog. The stranger says nothing, though you notice his hand tighten slightly around his cup. No one can quite agree whether news travels faster by messenger or gossip. Gossip certainly reaches more taverns. An old woman near the hearth suddenly speaks up. "If you cross the marsh road tomorrow, leave silver at the standing stones." The room quiets politely. The reeve sighs. "Grandmother, not this again." "She can mock if she likes," the old woman snaps, pointing a crooked finger toward him. But marsh spirits take proud travellers first. Some villagers nod seriously. Others roll their eyes. Medieval superstition settles over daily life the way smoke settles into wool slowly, permanently, impossible to remove entirely. Travellers wear charms against drowning, fever, bad harvests, lightning, curses, and occasionally difficult mothers-in-law. The old woman peers directly at you now. "You carry letters," she says. You hesitate. "Aye. Then keep iron close tonight." The stranger finally speaks. "Why?" "Because words anger people more than swords." That answer silences even the reeve. Later, after the villagers drift gradually towards sleep, you sit near the fading fire, mending a loose saddle strap while wind rattles the shutters. The stranger sits across from you, sharpening his knife with slow, steady strokes. You trust village warnings, you ask quietly. Which one? The spirits. I trust fear, he says. Fear creates its own truths. Before you can answer, the dog suddenly lifts its head toward the doorway. Outside, somewhere beyond the rain and darkness, a horse whinnies sharply. Not from your stable. Another horse. Close. The stranger stands immediately. Then comes the unmistakable sound of riders approaching through mud. More than one. The hall falls silent except for the wind. Everyone hears the riders now. Hooves strike the muddy road outside in slow, uneven rhythms, muffled by rain and distance. One horse snorts sharply. Harness chains jingle faintly through the dark. The reeve sets down his cup without a word. Several villagers glance toward the shutters while children are quietly ushered farther from the door. Medieval villages survive partly by learning when not to ask questions too quickly. The stranger beside the fire slips his knife back into its sheath. Stay calm, he murmurs. You sound experienced. I sound tired. Outside, the riders stop somewhere near the wayside cross. For several long moments, nobody moves. Then comes a knock at the outer door. Not loud, just deliberate. The reeve exhales slowly and crosses the room carrying a lantern. You notice two younger villagers gripping wood axes near the hearth, pretending very badly not to be frightened. The door opens a crack. Cold wind pushes inside, carrying rain and the smell of wet horses. 3 riders wait beyond the threshold beneath dark cloaks beaded with water. Their faces remain shadowed beneath hoods, though you glimpse mail beneath one rider's cloak and a sword hilt at another's side. Travellers. Or something close enough. Evening, says the reeve cautiously. One rider nods. We seek warmth and dry shelter. Reasonable request. Potentially terrible timing. The reeve hesitates only briefly before stepping aside. Refusing armed travellers during a storm risks creating the very trouble you hope to avoid. Medieval hospitality survives partly because nobody wants angry wet strangers sleeping nearby with grudges. The riders enter slowly. Rainwater drips onto the rush-covered floor while the newcomers lower their hoods one by one. All men, road-worn. One broad-shouldered with a flattened nose broken long ago. Another younger, pale-faced, constantly scanning the room. The third notices you almost immediately, and pauses, just slightly, but enough. The stranger near your fire notices it too. No one can quite agree whether danger announces itself loudly or quietly. Songs prefer loud danger, real roads prefer silence. The reeve offers stew and places near the hearth. The newcomers accept with stiff courtesy, while villagers gradually return to their business, though conversation never fully recovers its earlier warmth. You continue working on the saddle strap while pretending not to watch. The pale rider whispers something to the broken-nosed man. Both glance briefly toward your satchel. There it is again. That tiny movement. That little moment too quick for honesty. The stranger across from you leans back casually against the wall. Friends of yours, he asks softly. Not unless I've suffered memory loss. Possible on these roads. A fair point. Outside. Rain strengthens again, rattling hard against the roof while smoke curls heavily through the rafters. The hall grows warmer but somehow less comfortable. Even the dog abandons the children and settles close beside your boots once more. One of the newcomers eventually rises and approaches the reeve near the fire. We passed riders south of the marsh, he says conversationally. Bad roads there. Aye. The man's gaze drifts carelessly around the room. Heard a courier travelled north from the castle 3 days ago. Every muscle in your shoulders tightens. The reeve shrugs carefully. Road sees many travellers. So it does. The stranger near you suddenly speaks loudly enough for half the hall to hear. "Courier work in this weather," he scoffs. "Poor fool deserves whatever swamp fever finds him." A few villagers chuckle nervously. The rider glances toward him instead now. "Perhaps." The stranger shrugs lazily. "Personally, I'd rather wrestle monastery pigs." "You've done that." "Twice, lost both times." That earns a genuine laugh from several villagers, easing the tension slightly. You almost smile despite yourself. Almost. Hours crawl past slowly after that. Rain continues. The riders remain. Nobody quite relaxes. Eventually, sleeping places are arranged across the hall. Travellers wrap themselves in cloaks near the fire while villagers retreat to adjoining cottages. The reeve apologises for limited space, though frankly, you are grateful for any roof not actively leaking on your face. You lie awake longer than you should. The fire burns low beside shadowed walls. Wet cloaks hang from pegs overhead. Somewhere near the doorway, one of the riders snores softly. Another coughs now and then in his sleep. Or pretends to sleep. The stranger lies several paces away with one arm beneath his cloak. Knife close at hand. The dog sleeps pressed against your boots. Outside, wind moans across the village roofs while rainwater drips steadily from the eaves. You close your eyes eventually, not fully trusting sleep. Sometime deep in the night the dog growls. Low. Immediate. Your eyes open at once. The hall remains dark except for dying embers near the hearth. Shapes lie motionless beneath blankets around the room. Then you hear it. Soft footsteps. Someone moving carefully between sleepers. Your hand slips beneath your cloak toward the hidden letter. The footsteps pause. A shadow stands near your belongings. Very still. Then another shape rises silently from the darkness across the hall. The stranger. You barely glimpse the movement before he crosses the room in 2 silent strides and catches the intruder's wrist hard enough to force a muffled curse. Everything erupts at once. The dog barks furiously. Someone shouts. Villagers jolt awake in confusion while embers scatter from the hearth. The intruder twists violently free and bolts toward the doorway. One of the other riders surges upright at the same instant. Too coordinated. Not coincidence. The stranger slams the second man backward into a support post while you scramble to your feet, clutching the satchel beneath your cloak. Benches overturn. A child begins crying somewhere behind the partition wall. Out roars the reeve, out of my hall. The first intruder reaches the door and vanishes into the storm outside. The second tears free from the stranger's grip long enough to shove him sideways into the fire pit stones. Sparks explode upward. Then he runs too. By the time villagers seize lanterns and stumble into the rain after them, the riders are already disappearing into darkness beyond the village. Gone. Only hoofbeats remain briefly through the storm. Then nothing. The hall slowly settles again around overturned benches and frightened whispers. A stranger wipes blood from one knuckle where skin split against someone's teeth or buckle. You hurt, he asks you. No. You checked the letter. You reach beneath your cloak immediately. Still there. Seal intact. Relief washes through you so suddenly your knees almost weaken. The reeve stares toward the open doorway where rain blows cold across the floor. I knew it, mutters the old woman from near the hearth. Words anger people more than swords. Nobody argues with her this time. The stranger looks toward the dark road north beyond the village. They'll ride ahead now, he says quietly. You're certain? Yes. The dog growls softly beside the door. Outside, somewhere beyond the rain and marshland ahead, the road to the border keep has just become far more dangerous than before. And dawn is still hours away. Dawn arrives cold, grey, and exhausted. The storm weakens shortly before sunrise, leaving the village soaked beneath drifting mist. Water drips steadily from roof edges while smoke rises reluctantly from damp chimneys. Mud covers everything now: the road, the yards, the boots lined beside the hall fire drying slowly in the weak warmth. Nobody sleeps much after the night's disturbance. The Reeve and several villagers spend the remaining dark hours checking stables, counting tools, and muttering grimly about strangers on winter roads. One boy swears he saw 4 riders instead of 3. Another insists the fleeing men vanished without hoofprints near the marsh path. Those who tell the tale never fully agree once fear settles into memory. You sit near the rekindled fire, tightening straps on your satchel, while the stranger washes blood from his knuckles with cold water from a bucket. The cut along his hand looks painful but shallow. "You knew they were searching for something," you say quietly. He shrugs. "I suspected. That would have been useful information earlier." "Yes," he admits calmly. "Probably." An infuriating man. Still, without him the letter might already be gone. The brown dog sleeps beside the hearth after a heroic night of barking at absolutely everything. Several villagers now feed it scraps openly. By medieval standards, this practically makes the animal mayor. The Reeve approaches carrying bread wrapped in cloth. "Take food before you leave," he says. "Road north floods near the marsh crossing." You accept gratefully. "We owe you thanks." The Reeve snorts. "You owe me fewer armed visitors." Fair. Outside, the morning feels raw and silver beneath low clouds. Frost melts slowly into puddles reflecting pale sky. Your mare seems unimpressed by the entire concept of continuing north, though she submits patiently while you check the saddle. The stranger mounts his horse beside you. "You still ride to the keep?" he asks. "I didn't come this far for sightseeing." "At least your judgment remains poor." Together you leave the village behind while sleepy figures watch from doorways wrapped in blankets and shawls. The old woman near the wayside cross-raises 2 fingers toward you in blessing. "Leave silver at the stone," she calls. The stranger sighs quietly. "You planning to—" "Honestly, maybe." The road soon narrows again between low hills striped with dead winter grass. Pools of standing water gleam beside the track while fog drifts across open ground in pale sheets. Somewhere distant, unseen geese call across marshland. The landscape changes slowly as you ride north. Trees thin out. The earth softens beneath the horse's hooves. Reeds begin appearing beside shallow pools rimmed with ice. The air smells different here: wet soil, stagnant water, and the sharp mineral scent of river mud. Marsh country? Travellers hate marsh roads for good reason. Paths vanish easily, wheels sink, horses stumble. Mist confuses distance and direction until every hill looks alike. Some regions place willow branches beside safer routes because even locals occasionally wander into bogs deep enough to swallow carts. And somewhere ahead, the riders from last night may already be waiting. By midday you reach the standing stones. They rise unexpectedly from the marsh edge beside the road, 3 weathered pillars leaning slightly inward like old men whispering secrets. Moss covers their lower halves, while carved spirals remain faintly visible beneath centuries of rain and wind. Tiny offerings rest between the stones. Coins, ribbon scraps, a clay bead, dried flowers tied with twine. The old village woman clearly has competition. No one can quite agree who raised the stones originally. Some say pagans before the coming of Christianity. Others insist giants placed them there in ancient winters. Monks usually claim demons built them, though monks blame demons for most architecture older than themselves. You dismount slowly. The stranger watches with visible amusement as you place a small silver coin among the offerings. You actually believe it helps. No, you say. Then why leave it? You glance toward the endless mist stretching over the marsh. Because I'd rather lose one coin than discover I was wrong. A reasonable medieval compromise. The stranger laughs softly and, after a moment's hesitation, adds a coin of his own. Interesting. The marsh road beyond grows steadily worse. Twice your mare nearly sinks fetlock deep into hidden mud beneath standing water. Narrow plank sections cross the wettest ground, slick with moss and age. Wind moves constantly through the reeds with the dry whispering sound like distant voices. The dog stays unusually close now. At times the fog thickens so heavily the world shrinks to horse ears and grey water. Then faintly ahead you hear bells. Not monastery bells. Small bells. Harness bells. You stop immediately. The stranger raises one hand. Through the mist emerges a wagon drawn by two broad marsh ponies draped in patched blankets. Tiny brass bells hang from their harness straps, chiming softly with each step. The wagon itself carries baskets of smoked fish, bundles of reeds, and clay jars tied carefully beneath canvas. An old ferryman drives it. His beard looks woven entirely from river fog and stubbornness. Well now, he calls as he nears. Travellers in weather sensible folk avoid. We aspire to poor decisions, replies the stranger. The ferryman nods approvingly. Couriers, then. Apparently everyone can tell. You ask about the river crossing ahead. Ferry still runs. The ferryman says, though water's high, saw riders cross earlier this morning too. Your attention sharpens instantly. How many? 3, maybe 4. Same uncertainty again. The ferryman scratches his beard. They asked strange questions. What kind? He studies you both carefully before answering. Questions about sealed letters. The marsh suddenly feels colder. Wind bends the reeds around the road while grey water ripples beside the track. Somewhere unseen, a bird bursts upward with a harsh cry. The stranger looks north. How far ahead? Hour perhaps, riding hard. The ferryman lowers his voice. You'd do well to avoid the old watchtower near the crossing. Men shelter there sometimes. Bandits. Hungry men, says the ferryman. Difference depends on whether you carry coin. He clicks his tongue and the wagon creaks onward through the mist. Harness bells fading slowly behind. You sit silent for several moments after he disappears. Then the stranger speaks quietly. They know about the letter now. You still haven't explained how... No, he says, I haven't. Ahead, somewhere beyond the marsh fog and river mist, the crossing waits. And perhaps the riders too. The marsh road narrows until it becomes little more than a ribbon of mud winding through grey water and reeds. By afternoon, even the sky seems swallowed by mist. The world shrinks to damp air, cold wind, and the steady creak of saddle leather. Your mare's breath steams heavily, while water laps softly beside the raised track. The dog dislikes the marsh. You can tell because it stops trotting proudly ahead and instead stays close enough to brush your boots every few moments, as though confirming you have not dissolved into fog. Honestly, a sensible concern. The stranger rides slightly ahead now, scanning the pale distance through drifting mist. Every so often he glances towards small rises of earth, emerging from the wetlands where twisted willow trees cling stubbornly to muddy ground. Watch the edges, he says quietly. Bog and holes. A wonderfully broad category of danger. No one can quite agree whether marshes truly swallow travellers whole the way stories claim. Some swear entire carts vanish beneath soft ground without trace. Others insist most deaths happen simply because exhausted people wander off the path at night and freeze quietly in the reeds. Either way, the lesson remains the same: stay on the road. The wind carries strange sounds here. Water moving beneath reeds. Bird cries hidden in fog. Distant splashes impossible to place. At one point you become convinced someone is walking parallel to the track beyond the mist, but when you stop and listen carefully, there is only the whisper of reeds rubbing together. The marsh enjoys making fools of nervous travellers. Toward late afternoon, the road finally rises onto firmer ground beside the river. You hear the water before seeing it. A deep rolling sound beneath the fog, heavy and cold. Then the river appears all at once wide, dark, and fast-moving beneath pale winter light. Muddy banks slope sharply towards swirling current carrying branches, patches of foam, and broken reeds downstream. Mist drifts low over the surface while icy wind sweeps unobstructed across the water. The ferry landing crouches beside the bank beneath a sagging timber shelter. A few travellers wait there already. A merchant with 2 mules loaded in wool sacks. A widow carrying cages of chickens beneath a patched cloak. A pair of silent pilgrims wrapped head to toe in muddy grey wool. And near the landing itself stands the old watchtower. The ferryman had not exaggerated. The tower leans slightly toward the river like a tired soldier refusing retirement. Half its upper stones have collapsed long ago, leaving broken walls exposed to wind and rain. Moss spreads thick across the remaining masonry, while crows perch along the cracked battlements. It would be an excellent place for ambushes. Or ghosts. Medieval architecture often multitasks. The ferryman himself waits near the dock, guiding a flat wooden ferry across the current with long poles and thick ropes stretched between riverbanks. The vessel creaks alarmingly even while empty. That thing safe, you ask? The stranger considers the ferry carefully. Safe is ambitious. Wonderful. The ferryman recognizes you immediately when he reaches shore. Still alive, then, he calls cheerfully. Against expectations. Best kind of travelling. He begins loading passengers carefully onto the ferry while muttering about river levels. The current presses hard against the wooden platform, making it sway beneath boots and hooves. Your mare steps aboard reluctantly. The dog absolutely refuses. For several minutes you attempt persuasion, bribery, and emotional negotiation with bread crusts while the ferryman watches patiently. Finally, the stranger simply picks up the dog and carries it aboard beneath one arm. The animal looks deeply betrayed by physics. The crossing begins slowly. The ferry groans against the current while the ferryman and his sons push with poles thick as small trees. River mist curls around everyone until faces become pale blurred shapes beneath dripping hoods. Water slaps against the ferry edges. The widow clutches her chicken cages like sacred relics. One pilgrim quietly recites prayers under his breath. Some swear rivers remember the dead who drown within them. Others leave coins in the water before crossings to appease unseen spirits beneath the current. Even now, many travellers refuse speaking loudly mid-crossing for fear of attracting bad luck. You mostly fear attracting hypothermia. Halfway across, the stranger suddenly stiffens beside you. He nods subtly toward the far bank. Through the mist, near the ruined watchtower, stand horses. 4 of them. Riders beside the stones. Waiting. Your stomach tightens immediately. The ferryman notices too. Damn fools, he mutters. The riders remain still as the ferry approaches shore. Cloaks whip in the river wind while one figure steps slightly forward. Broken nose. One of the men from the village hall. So much for coincidence. The stranger's hand settles quietly near his knife. Any clever ideas, you whisper? Yes, he says. I wish we'd had them earlier. The ferry scrapes against the muddy bank. Everything afterward happens quickly but strangely quietly, muffled by fog and river wind. The riders approach at once. "Easy now," calls the broken-nosed man. "No trouble needed." An immediate sign trouble is already present. The ferryman's sons freeze beside the ropes. The merchant backs toward his mules. One rider points directly at you. That courier carries something belonging elsewhere. Your pulse pounds hard beneath the hidden letter. The stranger steps slightly in front of you. "Road law still exists," he says calmly. "Not here," replies the rider. No one can quite agree where law truly lives in medieval borderlands. Castles claim authority, lords claim taxes, monasteries claim sanctuary, but lonely roads often belong simply to whoever arrives armed first. The broken-nosed rider extends one hand. "Give us the letter and ride away." Simple offer. Terrible outcome. The stranger glances sideways toward the ruined watchtower, the marsh road behind, the river current beside you. Calculating. Then the dog launches itself, barking furiously at the nearest horse. Chaos blooms instantly. The startled horse rears sideways into another rider. Chickens explode into panicked noise. The ferryman shouts. One pilgrim falls directly into the mud with remarkable spiritual commitment. Ride the stranger snaps. You do. Your mare lunges forward up the slippery bank while confusion erupts behind. Someone grabs for your reins and misses. Another rider curses as horses crash together in the fog. The stranger wheels his own horse sharply beside yours while the dog somehow keeps pace through pure outrage and determination. Behind you comes shouting. Then hoofbeats. They are following. Of course they are. You race north beside the river through freezing wind and thickening dusk while mud sprays beneath pounding hooves. The road ahead vanishes repeatedly into fog. Somewhere beyond this river country lies the border keep. Somewhere behind, riders chase you through gathering darkness. And tucked beneath your cloak, the sealed letter suddenly feels heavier than iron. The road beyond the river twists through low hills and sparse woodland beneath a darkening sky. Your mare runs hard despite the mud, breath roaring white into the freezing air while hoofbeats hammer against the soaked ground. Behind you, the pursuing riders crash through puddles and reeds somewhere within the fog, sometimes close, sometimes maddeningly distant. The dog keeps pace beside the horses with astonishing determination. You begin suspecting it may actually be powered by ancient curses and stolen stew. Wind lashes your cloak as dusk thickens across the borderlands. The stranger rides beside you, low over the saddle, eyes fixed ahead. There, he shouts over the wind. A light flickers far ahead through the mist. Then another. Torchlight. Relief hits you so sharply it almost hurts. The border keep rises gradually from the gloom atop a rocky hill overlooking the river road. Thick outer walls loom dark against the storm clouds while torch baskets burn along the battlements, their flames bending sideways in the wind. A squat tower anchors the gatehouse beneath banners snapping stiffly overhead. Even from a distance, the place feels tense. Not abandoned. Not peaceful either. The outer ditch surrounding the keep glistens with rainwater while sharpened stakes protrude from muddy embankments. Several guards patrol the walls carrying spears and lanterns. Somewhere inside the fortress, a horn sounds low and brief. Military readiness. You urge your mare harder uphill toward the gate. Behind, hoofbeats grow louder again. The riders are gaining. Gate the stranger bellows upward. One guard leans over the battlements with a lantern. Who approaches? Courier from the southern castle. A pause. Too long. The broken-nosed rider emerges from the fog below the hill with the others close behind. Open, damn you, the stranger roars. The gate guards exchange shouts overhead. Chains rattle somewhere beyond the walls. Slowly, painfully slowly, the heavy oak gate begins to move inward. Medieval gates never hurry for anyone. Entire kingdoms could collapse while gatekeepers debate procedures. You race toward the narrowing opening just as the pursuing riders charge uphill behind. Arrows suddenly whistle from the battlements. One strikes the mud beside a horse with a wet thud. Another snaps against stone. The attackers scatter instinctively. Your mare surges through the gate moments before it slams shut again behind you with a crash that echoes across the courtyard. Outside, angry voices shout through the storm. Inside, a silence falls abruptly. You sit trembling slightly in the saddle while rainwater drips from your hood onto the stones below. Torches hiss in iron brackets along the walls. Guards surround you immediately with spears lowered. The stranger dismounts first, hands visible. "Courier bearing sealed correspondence," he says calmly. A captain pushes forward through the guards. He is broad-shouldered, grey-bearded, and wrapped in a fur-lined surcoat bearing Lord Edric's sigil, a black tower beneath crossed antlers. A long scar disappears beneath his beard near one eye. His expression suggests he has trusted absolutely nobody since childhood. "You're late," he says. "Road conditions objected." The captain ignores the joke entirely. "Name?" You answer, "Message. Sealed for Lord Edric directly." At this, the captain's eyes sharpen. Around you, the keep-yard smells of wet stone, horse dung, wood smoke, and forge fires burning somewhere deeper within the walls. Men-at-arms move briskly through the rain, carrying bundles of arrows and sacks of grain. Near one wall, a blacksmith hammers glowing iron beneath a covered lean-to while sparks scatter like fireflies. The keep prepares for something, or fears something already begun. The captain gestures toward the stranger, and him, traveller. The captain studies the scarred man for a long moment. "Convenient. Rare thing on these roads," replies the stranger. For a terrifying second, you wonder whether the guards might arrest both of you immediately. Border keeps are not known for warm welcomes. They exist to suspect everyone equally. Then the dog trots through the gate tunnel, dripping wet and sneezing dramatically. One of the guards laughs despite himself. The tension cracks slightly. Only slightly. You are escorted through the inner yard toward the keep hall while the stranger follows under close watch. Rain continues tapping against stone and timber roofs overhead. Lantern light reflects off puddles across the courtyard. Inside the hall, warmth rolls over you in waves. Huge hearth fires burn beneath smoke-blackened beams while servants hurry carrying trenchers of bread and steaming pots of stew. Hounds sleep beside the fire. Soldiers crowd long tables drinking ale and muttering over dice games interrupted by your arrival. Everything smells of wet wool, iron, smoke, and cooked onions. Honestly, after the road outside, it feels almost luxurious. Rushes cover the stone floor, fresher than most you've encountered recently. Tapestries line the walls depicting hunts, saints, and at least one battle no surviving horse appears particularly happy about. The captain leads you toward a raised platform where Lord Edric himself sits beside the fire. He is older than you expected. Not weak, never that, but silver-haired beneath heavy brows, wrapped in dark furs with one hand resting near a goblet of mulled wine. His eyes remain sharp despite the late hour. Beside him stand two advisors and a monk clutching rolls of parchment. The room quiets as you approach. You kneel briefly and remove the sealed letter from beneath your cloak. At last, after forest roads, marsh fog, suspicious riders, broken sleep, and river chases, the message finally leaves your hands. Lord Edric studies the seal carefully before breaking it with a thumb. The crack of wax sounds strangely loud. Silence settles across the hall while he reads, No one can quite agree whether silence or shouting feels more dangerous in a lord's hall. Silence at least gives you time to worry creatively. The fire pops softly nearby. Rain taps the shutters. At the far end of the hall, someone coughs into ale. Lord Edric finishes reading at last. His face reveals almost nothing, which is deeply concerning. He folds the letter once, then twice. Finally he looks toward you. You were followed. Yes, my lord. We expected as much. That sentence lands heavily in the room. One advisor mutters something under his breath. The monk crosses himself quietly. Lord Edric's gaze shifts toward the stranger standing under the guard nearby. And who escorted my courier through half the borderlands? The stranger hesitates for the first time since you met him. Then, very calmly, he reaches beneath his cloak and produces a small iron seal ring. The captain stiffens immediately. So does Lord Edric. The lord says quietly. The stranger bows his head once. Even now, it's hard to tell whether relief or danger arrives first when secrets finally speak aloud. Around you, the hall grows very still, and suddenly you realize the road north was only part of the journey after all. The hall fire crackles softly while nobody speaks. Rain taps against the shutters. Somewhere high in the rafters, smoke curls through dim torchlight. Every eye in the room settles on the iron ring resting in the stranger's hand. You study it carefully now. A black tower engraved beneath crossed antlers. Lord Edric's seal. Not a forgery. Not stolen. Real enough to tighten the captain's jaw immediately. The stranger lowers his hood fully at last. I travelled under orders, he says calmly. Whose orders? Asks the captain. The man's expression barely changes. His... He nods toward Lord Edric. A long silence follows. Honestly, medieval halls contain entirely too many dramatic pauses. Someone should have invented quicker explanations centuries earlier. Lord Edric finally leans back slowly in his chair. You took your time reaching me, he says. The Rhodes objected. A faint smile touches the lord's mouth for the first time. Interesting. You were seen... Yes. Followed. Yes. Recognized. The stranger hesitates. Possibly. Lord Edric exhales quietly and gestures toward the fire. Then sit before you collapse. The tension eases slightly round the hall, though several guards still look unconvinced. One never entirely relaxes near disguised agents arriving through storms with hidden seals and suspicious timing. You, meanwhile, are trying very hard not to look foolish for spending days distrusting the only person repeatedly saving your life. The dog solves this problem by immediately walking over and falling asleep beside the stranger's boots. Apparently loyalty transfers quickly in medieval animals. Servants bring hot wine mixed with cloves and honey, while Lord Edric rereads the letter beneath candlelight. Nearby, the monk murmurs quietly with one advisor over maps spread across the table. You catch fragments. For southern patrols, river crossings, messages intercepted. The pieces begin fitting together slowly. Not random attacks, not simple bandits. Someone has been hunting correspondence deliberately across the border roads. Lord Edric finally looks toward you again. You carried the letter well. My lord, you lost no seal, spoke to no officials beyond gates, allowed no inspection. No, my lord. Good. The approval warms you more than the fire. Medieval couriers survive largely on small acknowledgements. Nobody praises the road until a message fails to arrive. Then suddenly everyone discovers deep emotional feelings about punctuality. The captain steps closer to the lord. The riders outside. Watching us, says Lord Edric, or confirming the message reached safely. The scarred stranger drinks slowly from his cup before speaking again. They'll report north by dawn. Yes, says the Lord grimly, which means we answer tonight. There it is. The return journey. You knew it would come, yet your shoulders still sink slightly at the words. Lord Edric notices. Do not look so wounded, he says dryly. You've only crossed flooded marshes, hostile roads, and one attempted robbery. Comforting perspective, my lord. A few nearby soldiers laugh softly. The hall relaxes further now that food and warmth reclaim attention. Servants carry trenchers of roasted onions, smoked fish, coarse bread, and thick venison stew between the tables. Wet cloaks steam beside the hearth while guards dice quietly in corners. The ordinary life of the keep continues despite danger. That is the strange thing about medieval fortresses. Even while spies move through forests and riders wait beyond walls, someone still must scrape kettles, mend harness straps, trim candles, and carry chamber pots upstairs. History survives on small chores. You eat at last beside the lower fire while the stranger whose name you finally learn is Martin sits across from you cleaning mud from his gloves. You could have mentioned you serve the keep, you mutter. Martin shrugs. Safer not to. For whom? Yes. Again with the mysterious answers. No one can quite agree whether secrecy protects kingdoms or merely exhausts everyone involved. Still, looking around the tense hall tonight, you begin understanding why men like Martin hide their names on dangerous roads. A young servant refills cups nearby. You rode through Black Alder, he asks you quietly. Yes. The boy crosses himself immediately. My uncle says the forest's cursed. Your uncle says that about cheese too. The boy thinks about this. Fair. At the far end of the hall, musicians quietly tune a fiddle and pipe for the evening meal. Not celebration exactly, more habit than joy. Border keeps cling tightly to routine because routine keeps fear from settling too deeply into the walls. Outside, wind rattles the shutters. A horn sounds once from the battlements. The captain rises immediately and crosses toward the doorway. Several guards follow. You tense instinctively. Moments later, the captain returns. Riders gone, he reports. Lord Edric nods once. Then they carry news north already. The Lord folds his hands slowly before looking toward you. I require a reply delivered south before snowfall worsens. Of course he does. Martin glances toward you over his cup. You still willing? You think of the marsh fog, the broken cartwheel, the riders at the river, the dark forest roads, the warm monastery bells fading behind you. Then you think of simply staying here forever eating stew beside the fire while other people risk death professionally. Tempting. Very tempting. Yet some stubborn part of you already belongs to the road now. I'll carry it, you say. Lord Edric nods approvingly. Good. The monk beside him begins preparing fresh parchment immediately while wax candles burn low across the hall. Scribes sharpen quills. Maps are rolled away. Guards resume quieter conversations near the doors. The keep settles gradually into night. Later, after supper, you climb the battlements briefly beside Martin while cold wind sweeps across the hills. From here, the borderlands stretch dark beneath scattered moonlight breaking through clouds. Forests loom black in the distance. Marsh water glimmers faintly silver far below. Somewhere out there, roads twist through villages, shrines, ferry crossings, and lonely fields now hidden by darkness. So what's truly happening, you ask him quietly. Martin rests his arms on the wet stone parapet. Messages vanish, patrols disappear, lords stop trusting one another. Why, maybe. The word drifts into the wind between you. Below, torchlight flickers across the keepyard while stable boys settle horses for the night. A distant bell rings somewhere beyond the hills. Martin looks toward the dark road south. "If we ride before dawn," he says softly, "we might stay ahead of them." Might. A deeply medieval level of optimism. The wind sharpens around the battlements while clouds move slowly across the moon overhead. And below your cloak, where the first sealed letter rested for so many dangerous miles, there will soon be another. Snow begins during the night. Not heavily at first, just thin white flakes drifting across the battlements beneath torchlight, while the keep settles into uneasy sleep. By the time the pre-dawn bell sounds from the inner chapel, the courtyard stones wear a pale dusting of frost and snow mixed together. You wake stiff beneath rough wool blankets in the guest chamber above the hall. The room smells of cold stone, damp boots drying beside embers, and old smoke trapped permanently in timber beams overhead. For several moments you simply lie still listening. Wind against shutters. Guards changing watch below. Horses shifting in the stable yard. The familiar sounds of medieval mornings arriving long before anyone feels ready. Beside your bedroll, the dog snores softly with one paw twitching through mysterious dream adventures, possibly heroic, possibly involving sausages. A servant eventually brings hot oat porridge and black bread while the keep stirs awake around you. Soldiers descend staircases, tightening belts and fastening cloaks. Scribes hurry across corridors carrying fresh parchment sealed overnight with dark red wax. One of those seals now belongs to you. Lord Edric's reply rests hidden beneath your cloak, heavier somehow than the first letter despite being no larger. Perhaps responsibility weighs more on return journeys. Down in the hall, Martin waits near the hearth already dressed for travel. Snowflakes cling to his shoulders where he has just come in from the yard. "Road won't stay open long," he says. "Wonderful weather for survival." "You're learning." The captain approaches carrying a leather packet wrapped carefully in oilcloth. "Maps," he says gruffly, handing them to Martin. "Burn them if taken." "Comforting instructions." The captain then looks directly at you. South Road's changed since you arrived. Riders seen near the marsh again. Avoid the watchtower entirely. "We plan to..." "And courier..." You pause. If you're cornered, destroy the letter before surrendering it. The words settle heavily between you. No one can quite agree when written words became more dangerous than blades. But standing here beneath torchlight and falling snow, it certainly feels true. You leave the keep before sunrise. The gates groan open while snow drifts sideways through freezing wind. Guards atop the walls watch your departure in silence, spears dark against the pale morning sky. Beyond the hill, the road south disappears into white mist. Your mare breathes hard clouds into the cold air as you descend toward the lower fields. Martin rides slightly ahead while the dog bounds enthusiastically through shallow snow, delighted by conditions that every human nearby despises. The borderlands look transformed now. Marsh reeds wear silver frost, bare trees glitter pale beneath ice. Streams crust over at the edges where black water still moves beneath thin glassy surfaces. Even the muddy road has hardened somewhat under the cold, making travel easier in places and far more dangerous in others. A frozen rut can break a horse's leg as quickly as deep mud. You ride carefully. By midday, snow thickens. The world grows quieter beneath it. Hoofbeats dull softly against whitening ground, while distant sounds vanish into the falling weather. Smoke from scattered cottages rises straight upward into grey skies. Somewhere along the roadside, peasants chop ice from a water trough, while wrapped head to toe in wool and fur. Winter changes everyone's pace. Even fear moves slower. At a crossroads shrine, you stop briefly beneath the timber shelter to warm your hands around a small lantern. The shrine holds a painted saint carrying a walking staff, though water damage has blurred the face completely. Someone has left fresh rosemary there beside a beeswax candle. The smell reminds you suddenly of the monastery gate monk and his strange blessing. For memory, Martin notices your expression. What? Nothing. But memory follows the road closely now. The smoky alehouse, the broken cartwheel, village fires, marsh bells in the fog, the first terrifying glimpse of riders beside the river. It already feels strangely distant, though only days have passed. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether long journeys change the road or the traveller walking it. Perhaps both slowly reshape each other. You continue south through light snowfall until late afternoon when the road bends around a low wooded hill. Then Martin abruptly raises one hand. You stop instantly. Ahead, barely visible through drifting snow, stands a wagon sideways across the road. Broken axle. One wheel sunk deep into frozen mud. A familiar sight. Too familiar. No driver, you whisper. The dog growls immediately. Martin studies the trees lining the road. Careful. Snowflakes drift silently around you while the wagon creaks faintly in the wind. Several sacks lie scattered nearby, half-covered already in white powder. Abandoned, or arranged. You dismount slowly, leading your mare forward by the reins. The silence feels wrong. No curses from frustrated carters, no struggling oxen, no villagers hauling rope. Just snow. Then movement flashes between the trees. An arrow strikes the wagon frame with a sharp crack. Down Martin shouts. Another arrow hisses past your shoulder into the snow. The ambush erupts all at once. Riders burst from the woods on both sides of the road, cloaks whipping behind them while horses crash through brush and frozen puddles. 3 at least. Maybe 4. The same hunters from before. Martin draws his knife immediately while hauling his horse sideways across the road. The dog launches forward, barking furiously at the nearest mount like a tiny furious saint of bad decisions. You scramble behind the wagon, heart hammering violently. Another arrow slams into the wood above your head, showering splinters into your hood. Ride east, Martin shouts, into the trees. Easy instruction. Complicated terrain. Your mare panics as one rider charges through the snowfall toward you, sword raised. You seize the reins and pull hard, stumbling through icy mud while the horse rears sideways. The rider closes fast. Then suddenly the dog leaps directly at his horse's face. Chaos again. Honestly, the animal deserves formal military rank at this point. The startled horse veers sharply into the ditch, throwing the rider half from the saddle with a curse loud enough to melt snow. Go Martin roars. You do. Together you crash into the trees beside the road while snow lashes through branches overhead. Horses slip on frozen roots. Low limbs whip across your cloak and face. Behind you, shouts echo through the woods as the riders pursue. The forest swallows everything into white confusion. Branches, snow, breath, pounding hooves. And somewhere beneath your cloak, hidden close against your chest, the second sealed letter remains unbroken still. The forest closes around you in a blur of snow and branches. Your mare crashes through undergrowth slick with ice while low limbs claw at your cloak and hood. Snow falls harder beneath the trees now, spinning wildly through gusts of wind that howl between the trunks like distant voices. Behind you come shouts, hoofbeats, then silence again. The woods distort sound completely. At times the riders seem only paces behind, then suddenly nowhere at all. Martin rides ahead, weaving between dark oaks and alder roots with alarming confidence. Either he knows these woods better than expected, or he has simply made peace with dying creatively. The dog appears and disappears through drifting snow like an angry little spirit. You duck beneath a hanging branch, barely in time to avoid losing your head, and perhaps several useful thoughts attached to it. This way, Martin calls. Ahead, the ground slopes downward toward a narrow stream half frozen beneath white-crusted ice. Water rushes black beneath the surface while reeds bend under snow along the banks. Martin reins sharply left, following the stream instead of crossing. You understand immediately. Running water confuses tracks. No one can quite agree whether that trick works better on wolves, hunters, or spirits, but travellers have trusted rivers to hide them for centuries. The snow deepens steadily. Your mare labours harder now, breath roaring harshly in the cold. Ice gathers along her mane and saddle straps. You risk one glance backward. Nothing, only trees fading into white mist. Still, fear keeps riding with you. Eventually, Martin slows near a rocky outcrop hidden among pines. Beneath it yawns a shallow hollow protected from wind by leaning stones and thick roots. A shelter. Not good, but enough. You dismount stiffly while snow swirls beyond the trees. The dog arrives moments later, panting furiously, and immediately shakes icy water across both of you with deep personal satisfaction. Perfect, you mutter, exactly what I needed. Martin almost smiles while checking the woods behind. No pursuit, at least for now. You gather fallen branches beneath the rocks while Martin strikes flint carefully beneath his cloak to shield the sparks from wind. After several attempts, a tiny fire finally catches among dry moss and twigs hidden under the stone ledge. Warmth blooms slowly. Blessedly, you crouch near the flames, holding numb hands toward the heat, while snow drifts beyond the shelter entrance in pale curtains. Smoke curls upward into the dark roots overhead. The dog collapses beside the fire immediately, heroic duties apparently completed for the day. Your cloak steams faintly as ice melts from the wool. For a long while neither you nor Martin speaks. The road has vanished entirely now. There is only forest, snow, and the small crackling fire between you. Finally you break the silence. How long have they been after these letters? Martin stares into the flames. Months. Why? Because messages carry alliances, troop counts, tax routes, oaths. Or again, almost. A dangerous word. Outside, wind moves through the pines with the low, endless sigh. Martin removes one glove and flexes stiff fingers near the fire. The cut across his knuckles from the village fight has reopened slightly. You ever carry messages before this, he asks. A few. Any this troublesome? No. Good, he says. Wouldn't want unrealistic standards. A dry laugh escapes you before you can stop it. The firelight softens the hard lines of his face now, making him look less like a shadow from the road and more simply exhausted. Beneath the soot and weather stains, he cannot be much older than you first guessed. Just worn thinner by secrets. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether spies and couriers become lonely because they hide truths, or whether lonely people simply survive such work longer than others. You share the last of the monastery bread and hard cheese while snow piles quietly beyond the rocks. It tastes stale now, but still better than hunger. Somewhere far off, a wolf howls. The dog lifts one ear, considers the matter carefully, then returns to sleep. Professional confidence. Martin glances toward the hidden letter beneath your cloak. You kept it safe. So far. That matters. You look into the fire. I still don't even know what's written inside. Better that way. Is it? Yes. He says it without hesitation. In the medieval world, ignorance often protects ordinary people better than armor ever could. A messenger carrying sealed words survives partly because he does not know enough to betray them under fear. Comforting thought. Terrible profession. Night deepens slowly around the shelter. The snowfall eases at last, leaving the forest hushed beneath thick white silence. Moonlight begins appearing faintly between branches overhead. Ice glitters softly along the stones. You grow drowsy beside the warmth despite yourself. Travel exhaustion settles into the body like wet sand. Every mile rides inside your bones afterward. Martin keeps watch while you rest briefly against your rolled cloak. At some point you wake to the sound of monastery bells. Or think you do. Soft. Distant. Almost swallowed by wind. For one confused moment you imagine yourself back beside the abbey walls, with candlelight glowing through mist and monks crossing frost-covered courtyards. Then you realize the sound comes from memory alone. The forest around you remains silent. Only the fire crackles quietly now. Martin notices you stirring, dreaming. Maybe, good sign, means you're not frozen. Encouraging standards again. Near dawn, the snow finally stops completely. The sky beyond the trees fades slowly from black to deep grey. Birds begin calling cautiously from hidden branches, while frost smokes pale above the stream nearby. You stamp feeling back into stiff boots while saddling the horses once more. The road south still waits somewhere beyond the woods. And beyond that road lies the castle where this journey first began. Martin tightens his cloak against the cold. If we ride hard today, we reach the southern valleys by dusk. And if the riders find us again, he checks the edge of his knife calmly. Then we continue having a very difficult week. Fair enough. You extinguish the little fire beneath the rocks, scattering snow over the last glowing embers until only thin smoke remains curling into the freezing morning air. Then, with the letter still hidden safely beneath your cloak, you leave the shelter behind and ride south through the whitening forest toward home. Morning opens slowly across the southern valleys. After the long night beneath the rocks, the world feels softer somehow. Snow lies across the fields in pale silver sheets, while smoke rises peacefully from distant cottages tucked among bare orchards and frozen streams. The wind has calmed at last. Even the horses move more quietly now, their breath drifting gently into the cold dawn air. You ride beside Martin along a narrow road bordered by frost-covered hedges. The dog trots ahead through shallow snow, leaving crooked tracks behind like careless writing across parchment. No riders follow. At least none you can see. The silence feels strange after so many days of tension and pursuit. For the first time since leaving the castle, you notice simple things again. The creak of saddle leather warming in sunlight, ravens circling above distant ploughed fields, the smell of wood smoke drifting from unseen farmhouses where morning bread already bakes beside hearth fires. The medieval world continues steadily onward no matter how frightened or important travellers believe themselves to be. A woman scatters grain to chickens beside a frozen well. A shepherd repairs a fence line with numb hands. Laundry stiffens on ropes between cottages like surrendered banners. Somewhere far off, bells ring faintly through the crisp air. Life moves by small necessities. Always. By midday, the road grows more familiar. You pass the broken willow near the crossroad shrine where ribbons flutter stiffly in the cold wind. You cross the shallow ford where ice gathers around smooth black stones. A pair of merchants heading north recognize neither you nor Martin, though they nod politely while leading ponies loaded with wool bundles beneath patched cloaks. The danger has not vanished entirely, perhaps, but it has drifted farther away now, dissolving slowly behind you like fog lifting from marsh water. No one can quite agree whether roads remember travellers after they pass. Some swear certain paths grow unlucky after bloodshed or betrayal. Others insist roads care nothing at all for human worries. Still, you find yourself glancing back less often. By late afternoon, the hills surrounding the southern castle rise ahead through pale winter light. The sight settles something deep inside you. Stone towers, familiar walls, thin banners stirring above the battlements. Home, of a sort. Your mare seems to recognize the place too, quickening slightly despite her exhaustion. Even the dog lifts its head proudly as though personally responsible for the successful delivery of diplomatic correspondence, which, honestly, may not be entirely false. The outer fields surrounding the castle lie quiet beneath snow. Peasants carry firewood toward clustered cottages while smoke curls from bakehouses and kitchens along the lower walls. Near the gatehouse, guards wrapped in heavy cloaks stamp warmth into their boots beside braziers glowing red against the dusk. The gates open after only brief questioning. This time, nobody makes you wait in the cold while debating procedures for half the century. Inside the yard, everything smells wonderfully familiar horses, damp straw, chimney smoke, wet wool, and cooking onions drifting from the kitchens. Stable boys hurry forward to take the reins while servants cross the courtyard, carrying bundles of rushes for the hall floors before nightfall. You dismount carefully, legs trembling slightly after so many miles. Martin swings down beside you with less grace than usual. Exhaustion finally shows openly on his face now. The dog immediately wanders toward the kitchens in search of higher employment opportunities. A steward appears beneath the torchlit archway carrying his enormous ring of iron keys. The same man who first placed the sealed letter into your hands what now feels like another lifetime ago. "You returned," he says simply. "Barely. That still counts." He leads both of you inside through warm corridors smelling of smoke and beeswax. Servants pass carrying candles and folded blankets, while distant laughter echoes faintly from the great hall beyond. Life continuing, always continuing. At last you stand once more before the Lord's table beneath familiar tapestries and firelight. The hall glows gold against the dark winter evening outside. Rushes soften footsteps across the floor. Hounds sleep beside the hearth, while musicians somewhere near the kitchens play quietly on pipe and fiddle. The steward gestures toward you. "The courier has returned safely, my lord." You remove Lord Edric's sealed reply from beneath your cloak. Still intact. Still dry. Still carried all this impossible distance through forests, storms, villages, marshes, ambushes, and snow. The Lord breaks the seal carefully beside the fire. You watch the candlelight flicker across his face as he reads. Silence settles over the chamber once more, though this time it feels calmer somehow, less sharp around the edges. At length the Lord folds the letter closed. "Well carried," he says quietly. "Only 2 words. Yet they warm you more deeply than the fire." Martin bows slightly beside you. The Lord studies him briefly. You were followed, for part of the road, but the message remains secure. "Yes, my lord." The steward exhales softly through his nose, tension leaving him at last. Outside, evening bells begin ringing from the chapel tower. Slow, heavy, familiar. Servants move quietly through the hall, lighting fresh candles against the growing dark while snow drifts softly beyond the narrow windows. Somewhere nearby, bread crackles in ovens. Somewhere else, tired horses settle into clean straw after long roads. And slowly, almost without noticing, the fear of pursuit begins leaving your body. The road loosens its grip. The forest mist fades. The marsh wind quiets. The endless sound of hoofbeats behind you finally disappears into memory. Later, after warm food and mulled wine and the deep exhausted stillness that comes only after survival, You step briefly onto the outer wall overlooking the snow-covered countryside. Night has fully fallen now. The valleys below lie peaceful beneath moonlight and drifting frost. Chimney smoke rises pale into the still air. Far away, monastery bells echo softly across the winter dark like distant memories carried on the wind. You pull your cloak tighter and breathe slowly. The world feels older at night. Softer too. The dangerous roads, the hidden letters, the suspicious riders, the whispered secrets between border keeps and monastery fires, they all seem to drift farther away now, dissolving gently into the snow and darkness beyond the hills. Below in the yard, a stable lantern sways faintly beside sleeping horses. Somewhere inside the hall, someone laughs quietly over ale. The dog has almost certainly stolen something from the kitchens by now, and is probably very proud of itself. And you, at last, are no longer riding. You simply stand there a while beneath the cold stars while the castle settles round you, with the slow familiar sounds of rest crackling hearths, distant bells, muffled footsteps on rush-covered floors, the whisper of winter wind against stone. The medieval world grows still. Candles burn lower. Snow softens the roads, and beyond the walls, the long dark countryside stretches peacefully beneath the quiet sky, carrying its forests and rivers and lonely shrines gently towards sleep.